Good evening. Welcome to the Computer History Museum. It's so great to see all of you here, and if I haven't seen you before now, happy 2015. It's great to see you tonight and to welcome you back to this new season of Revolutionaries. I'm John Holler, the CEO, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of our trustees and our staff and our members and our many amazing volunteers. And now for tonight's program. Philip Sheppard is a virtuoso cellist and one of the world's most renowned composers for film and television, for live theater, and for large-scale live events. His film compositions include the award-winning documentaries Bobby Fischer Against the World and The Tillman Story, among many others. He recently composed the score for the wonderful BBC documentary The Human Universe, featuring Professor Brian Cox. Those are just among his many works on television. And his compositions for live events are truly epic. Music for the closing ceremonies of the Beijing Olympics in 2008, the medal ceremonies for the 2012 London Olympics, and the theme for the Grand Départ as the Tour de France rolled out last summer from the northeast of England, and many more. He's collaborated with Jimmy Page, Jarvis Cocker, and Jeff Buckley, among many others. He is a fellow of the Royal Academy of Music. A composer of Philip's stature today must grapple with the intersection of a rare Stradivarius, on the one hand, and the ever-changing digital world. He will talk about that and his life and career tonight, among many other subjects, including the nature of modern composition. And taking us through all of this is Will Travis, the CEO and senior partner of Sidley, New York. Sidley is one of the world's leading marketing and branding agencies, and Will co-hosts a major creative conference every year in Montreal, which is where he first introduced us to Philip. He was last here to moderate our evening on the art and technology of Cirque du Soleil, and we're delighted to welcome him back tonight. So please join me in welcoming Philip Sheppard and Will Travis.
So we're both from England, so we'll speak slowly.
You'd better speak extra slowly, I think.
He's posh, he's from the south, so you'll understand him. Okay, so I've had the great fortune of knowing Philip a few years now, and tonight's going to be a very special event, not just because of the insight of the cello and the world about music, but he's a top bloke, and that makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more interesting, not only for myself, but for yourself. And so when you do have those questions, please jot them down, and I'll try and get through as many as I can. To start with, I'm just going to ask a little bit about, when I was a kid growing up, the cello to me was sort of reminiscent of sitting by a log fire and not drinking port, but looking at my father drinking port. That came later. And actually, that sort of classical, sort of reminiscent sort of feel. But it's a lot more, and I've seen that, getting to know you over the last few years. Can you tell us a little bit more about the styles and how to engage with the cello?
Yeah, I could. I think it might be easier if I played a couple of things just to kind of maybe show a couple of different ends of the spectrum. I mean, I could talk about it, but it's a bit like talking about paint colours. I'll just show you a couple of little things. So yeah, I'll go over there. So yeah, I'll play you something to start with that's actually really, you probably recognise this tune. It's called La Folia, and it's probably the most covered classical theme in history, and it's still getting reinterpreted now. And it's one of those harmonic sequences that kind of gives you goosebumps. I'll probably prove that it won't give you goosebumps now, but we'll see. So I'm just going to do a little version of that to show the sort of classical side. I'm going to cheat a bit because I'm going to record what I'm playing whilst I'm playing and loop it back. So any mistakes I make will come back over and over and over again. So that might be kind of how we're used to hearing the cello in, as Will says, the kind of port by the fire surroundings. And that's certainly how I learned to play the cello. But when I was young, I realised I had quite a short attention span, and I kind of really wanted to play the guitar, but I'm crap at it. So I decided to try some other things. So I'll show you what I do now when I play or work with bands, which might be slightly the other end of the spectrum. This is a piece I wrote called Final Day. And it's really difficult because it's in 10/8, so there's loads of opportunities, to fall off the beat, as I might do. But at the end, I try and imitate an electric guitar with feedback. It's not the pedals, it's the cello.
You want to go and have a lie down?
Yes.
You must be
Yes.
You must be exhausted.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talked about as a child. How did you get into this? Many musicians are kind of pushed into it. Athletes are pushed into. Did you want to play the cello?
Yeah, I did. I was born into a family where my mum taught the violin, so there was music kind of all around the house all the time. My brother, who's older than me, was already playing the violin as well, and I knew I wanted to play something bigger. And honestly, that's what happened. Yeah, and this totally sounds like a cliche. It's God's honest truth. There was a radio program on, and it was the Elgar Cello Concerto, and it was Jacqueline du Pré playing it. And I honestly remember being in the kitchen. We had a crappy little transistor radio. Sorry, can I swear? I have. Who cares? A terrible little transistor radio. And I remember hearing this thing and saying, and it was Jacqueline du Pré playing. And I was like, I want to do that. What's that? My mum saying, that's a cello. What's it like? It's bigger than the violin. I want to play it. And she was actually quite clever because she said, no, you're not. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. And this is when I was 3. This was in 1972. I want to. It's not fair. She said, no, when you're older, you can. And this seemed to go on for years. It was actually about 3 months. And our local kindergarten headmistress happened to play the cello and happened to teach to make a bit of spare cash on the side. I'm looking back on it, it's totally illegal because it was during school hours in her office. And and so I learnt with her, and then went to her teacher, who was a professor at the Royal Academy. And then when I was 8, I met Jacqueline du Pré, and I told her, and she was really lovely. She said, well, you've got to keep practicing. You know, it's before she was completely debilitated. And I sort of have carried on, really, since then. That's what I do now.
So for 3.5,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you hold it at 3.5?
Well, I actually had a violin, a small violin with a spike on the end, and I used to sit on an upturned trash can. It was exactly the right height.
Awesome.
It's true. I got a picture of my first gig, and it was a trash can that had a cushion on it by that point, because, you know, a bit posher. And I did my first gig in 1973, and people were very polite, and I played a piece called Charlie and Fred, which I won't play for you now, but it was about 2 guinea pigs. And it was really moving, slow-moving, as I understand it. But persevered. And, yeah.
And does your brother still play the violin?
Yeah, but that's still bigger than a violin.
You didn't go to the bass?
No, I win. Yeah. No.
So tell us a little bit about the composition. We're at the Computer History Museum, and technology is very important. When you're actually composing, how important is the fluidity of the pencil versus the engagement with technology and the computer?
It's kind of essential. I'm one of these people who can't think on a screen. I find if I write music whilst developing a studio tan, staring at a screen in a darkened room, I can't have an original idea. I might come up with a weird noise or something, but I do everything in notebooks with a nice pencil and decent paper. And I think it's the same for lots of friends of mine who are writers. You know, the last thing you want to do is crack open Word when you've got an idea for a book. You know, post-it notes, you know, decent pencil, hopefully a nice view, loads of coffee. And I know, for me, I will always start with a pen and pencil and try and get the pieces developed as I can in my head, and then go to a cello. I can't play the piano. It's really embarrassing. You've got pitch meetings. Say, would you want to knock it out on the piano? I'm like, no, can't play it. Well, I learnt for 9 years and got grade 3, which is really bad.
That's terrible.
So I'm sticking to the cello because I'm a bit better at it. Yeah, but the pencils kind of is essential, and I always carry a notebook on me. It's because the ideas will hit you. And Paul Klee had this thing that, you know, drawing a picture is taking a line for a walk, and writing music is just taking a line from the first note to hopefully where you end up and coming back again. And it's a cliche, but even Marilyn Monroe says it in her diary. She says, I can only think in ink. And I think that's the same for me as well. That's probably the only thing I've got in common with Marilyn Monroe. And it's true, you know, you take a line for a walk on a page, and by the time you've reached the end of the sentence or the phrase, something's resolved itself. And as long as you come back to the point you started, you can kind of go anywhere in that.
Do you think that's something we're depriving our kids from? You know?
Yeah, and there's loads of scientific studies being published now that say exactly that actually, and there was a survey done of the top CEOs, and a shocking number of the top CEOs will use a notebook. Even, you know, one of the chief execs at Facebook was saying exactly the same thing, that it's actually, you need that. And I find actually one of the first things I do every day is write a list. And it might be something very mundane, but the moment I write it down, I can remember it. I can remember any phone number up until about 1994 when I started putting them in a Palm Pilot, and from then on I can't remember them.
I'm the same.
You know,
I can't remember.
But it's true, because I remember the handwriting. I remember the colour of the ink even. You know, but it's not there anymore. You know?
And so you've got 4 kids, do you prevent them from, do you encourage them more to write? Do you actually try and introduce them more? Or are they like, Dad, you're so boring?
Hopeless. No, of course not. I'm the same for anybody. You have to, I can't deprive them of what I would have wanted at their age. But yeah, I mean, for all the time, the screen time, there's as much time getting muddy and drawing and making a mess, and that's really important. And actually it's good to see that, going off on a tangent, with things like the maker movement, that there is a move to things coming out of the screen, I think, and getting your fingers dirty with art.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, the cello you're playing with now, it's not yours, I believe.
No,
you stole it.
I've actually nicked this from one of the best photographers in the world called Eric Cheng, who's an extraordinary technologist. And if you ever need an expert drone photographer or underwater photographer, he's your man. He also happens to be a virtuoso cellist.
Yeah.
And his cello is actually modelled on the same cello that mine's modelled on. I've got a couple of cellos at home. One's my modern cello, which was made in 1750. Older than America. tough crowd.
Don't hide behind me.
No,
you said it.
You said it.
Yeah.
Is actually exactly the same size as this. And the other one I use as well is a Stradivarius, which was made in 1692. Now, the problem with that is I take it out the country without asking the Queen or whoever for an export license. They all fine me 10% of its value as I go through Heathrow Airport, and it's worth $2 million. I didn't buy it. It's lent to me. But it's a bit of a nightmare to travel with, especially on a short trip.
And how do you travel with it? If you do travel?
It has the seat next to me, and it drinks a lot.
Do you open the case and start packing it up for the hotel room?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do people just think, like, why didn't you put it in the overhead?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Who's that, then?
Yeah, and I'm always the first on the plane. They preload me, even before the babies, and there's always two guys sitting behind me like this, checking it. Well, they're always TSA guys, you know, in the polo shirt, looking unnaturally casual. And I got on, actually, the last time I flew over, as I was getting on, the guy who was sitting there in very casual clothes was checking the clip in his pistol.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've actually come to recognise some of them as well. I mean, it's really, you know...
You should put a wig on it or something, like face eyes and
yeah.
something, like.
It's like, I don't know that you know that I've seen you do that, so I'll just sit in front of you and behave. Yeah.
So just going off the back of, you know, you got 1600 and 17 of my questions have just gone to pot.
Forget it,
1600, 1700, you know, cello, and then we're here, you know, with computers and technology and how much that's changed the world. How does it influence your world?
Technology?
Yeah.
Profoundly, because for me, it becomes the perfect catalyst and mechanism for being able to realise sounds, noises, and, you know, actually get things over quicker. I'm a Luddite in one sense that I like getting things, how can I say? Well, working with a pencil, working with an instrument at first, but then I'm quick to then kind of jump through and start using the tech as soon as I can for realising those ideas up pretty quickly. You know, I go in my studio and it's rammed with computing stuff. It's all kind of hidden away, but it's sitting there. The room kind of practically hums with it. But my entry point is from a kind of what I call a peak technology, which is that, you know.
And when you're working on different scores, so say we saw the beautiful piece before with the moon.
Oh, the Shadow of the Moon.
Shadow of the Moon with the Apollo. And do you take a different approach and say, right, I'm doing something now for the opening theme tune for the Computer History Museum for free. Thanks, Carol. No, but you're creating something like that. You know, it's got to be technology. Do you approach composition, right, I'm going to include technology in how I'm thinking? Or do you think different? Do you put yourselves in different situations? So you're obviously not going to go to the moon to do the Apollo piece, but
well, no,
how do you approach different...
do you know, I do a ridiculous amount of research before I even start writing. And for me, the fun thing about working in film is that you get to learn so much. You kind of almost become the archivist, if possible, for the research of the film, particularly in documentaries, which I love doing because they're real. It's true stuff. You often end up working with and meeting the people who are featured. So, for instance, with something like In the Shadow of the Moon, the first thing I did was, before we even started assembling the film, before anyone had even a script or a rough idea, I thought, I need to actually look at what are my reference points going to be? What's my palette? What's my sound world going to be? Almost which instruments can I leave out? You know, where do we start with this? And I went and bought a lunar map. Now, the great thing about the moon is that every single crater has got a beautiful name. You know, they're the Sea of Tranquility, but they're all in Latin. You know, the Mare Serenitas and the Sea of Honey. And you start writing these names down, and you think, oh, that actually sounds like the name for an ideal piece of classical music. So then what I do is I think, well, I think I'm going to use these instruments, and electronically I'm probably going to use the beep, the from the downlink, that, because it sounds like a little voice. So I turned that into a voice and repitched it, and that became a melodic thing. I knew the fragility of strings were very important. Started thinking about, well, and started corresponding with astronauts as well. You know, if I'm an astronaut, what's that equivalent to? It's basically they're frontier people. These are essentially the same as the people who went out in the gold rush. They're heading into uncharted territory. Yeah. So I know the Discovery Channel were hoping I'd write something kind of really bombastic with, you know, a big trumpet solo and a big orchestra, but I'm British, so that wasn't really going to happen. So I thought I'd write something that felt like a kind of Wild West score. So more Appalachian, more kind of, you know, going over the frontier. So in that sequence actually that was up there, it's kind of an untuned violin playing something that you might have at the beginning of a barn dance. And it's not really kind of rocket taking off music, but actually it's a very quiet moment in a weird kind of way, because, you know, we know what a rocket sounds like, and it's loud and we're, hey, great. But actually it's a moment to kind of go, do you know what? You did that. You know, there's a case point. Most films these days are kind of saying, look what we've done. But that film was, look what you did. And then the music writes itself, to be honest with you.
But when it has, you go in and you always have to present that to the director.
Yeah.
Do you ever go in and you're like, oh, there it is, and he's like, yeah, I thought it'd be a bit more bombastic and.
Yeah, all the time. But then I have to kind of say, well, here's why. And I'll often write 6 or 7 pieces before I even show them anything. And sometimes I'll take a cello in with me as well. That really unnerves them, because I'm thinking you've done this, and you just sit and play at them until they give in. They're not expecting that. No, and I love working that way. And with that film, it's kind of a progression, because then we got to tour the film with the astronauts. And I was telling Carol earlier that, you know, this is why music's so nice. You get to go to some really weird places and odd situations. Ended up having lunch with, and this is a tremendous name drop, so I'm so sorry, but with kind of Dave Scott and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins. And the bill was paid by this lovely little old man on the table who's called Walter Cronkite.
Wow.
And I did know who he was. But I remember ringing my dad and saying, I'm having lunch with Walter Cronkite. And for the first time ever, he said, actually, that's
pretty cool.
That's all right. No, that's all right.
Oh. Oh, no.
It's English.
It's all right, yeah. Oh.
Carry on.
Yeah. Did you do a selfie or not?
Yeah, no. No.
No, you didn't do that?
No.
Okay. So let's just go back a little bit to, you know, while you are composing, you know, when you're doing something like that, it feels very artsy. It kind of feels a bit more artistic. And we're kind of, you know, obviously with computing, you could say that the cello's hardware, and that you know, the programming is a bit more from yourself as the artist. Music could be code.
Yeah.
Would you therefore say that, you know, computing is more, therefore, could be art, and then composition is a science, or vice versa?
I get science and art mixed up, and I think most programmers and coders and technologists I know see no difference, which is a really good thing, actually. Going around the museum here, everything you look at is to me, is beautiful. I don't know if that's just because I'm an outright nerd, and it for me fulfills so many dreams seeing this stuff. But it's an interesting point about, you know, you mentioned notation, musical notation. A bit like the cello. That cello is modern. That was made in 2000, believe it or not, even though it sounds, you know, even though it's a 17th century design, which has not changed. Because it's reached its point. It doesn't need to change anymore. It's a peak technology. The evolution has, to all intents and purposes, not stopped, but has slowed right down to the point when the only interchangeable elements on that instrument are the 4 strings. That's it. So my cello I've got at home has been around for 400 years and will still be around in 400 years' time. My 9th laptop, which I'm using, having fried the other 8, won't be around next year because I will have killed it.
Yeah.
But that's fine, because the laptop is a transitory piece of technology. We base... And it needs to be, because transistors haven't quite finished, as I understand. I don't know a huge amount about it, but they're obviously an evolving science as well. Yeah. It's not going to reach... And actually, it's a device. And, you know, all companies around here have to rely on the fact that their sales, you're going to carry on buying the stuff because it's just something that is on a path like that. That's kind of stopped. Now, musical notation is probably the most efficient code I can think of. Again, the type of notation, if I had to write down what I just did for an orchestra, it would be exactly the same as a composer would write down in 1700. Nothing in it would be different, even down to the Italian expressions that we use, because that's the term we use. The staff is exactly the same. Nothing's changed. It's the most incredibly efficient system. I can go, as I have done, into a music shop in the back streets of Beijing, not being able to speak anything beyond ni hao, and then get a book of music out and sit and jam with a person the whole afternoon, because someone in the 17th century bothered to actually say, do you know what? I think it should work like this. That's kind of incredible. Now, notation absolutely fascinates me, because again, code is evolving, and it kind of has to kind of get more efficient. But and believe me, musical notation has gone through hundreds and hundreds of years. And the first musical notation were kind of wavy lines on a page, one of which turned itself into the question mark, because actually the question mark used to be, that mark, which gradually got sequenced over and became that shape, which actually kind of graphically represents what it is. And I tend to actually write pieces out longhand, even if it's for a big commission. I'll sit and write them. Sometimes I'll draw them. And in fact, I've got one, and sometimes the drawings are stupid. They're there to kind of to keep me amused. John, I don't know if you've got, so this is a piece I wrote. He's fast, isn't he? Which is, there's a friend of mine called Wave. Is he here? Wave, are you around? I don't know if he's around. Anyway, Wave is a fantastic chap from Pixar, Michael Johnson, who's a just genius programmer. And I wrote this little piece for him. And it basically is entirely playable. Obviously, it's ripped off of a Hiroshigo. Shall I show you a bit of it?
You can play that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go on,
so, so there's a few little things to look out for. There's a line that wiggles around that says poco voglio, which I'm sure anyone who speaks Italian better than me knows means little bird. So that's a line for a seagull over the top, which is kind of the descant line. Piacevole means kind of peaceful. So it's a surprisingly peaceful piece written out as a storm, but this guy is kind of huge and very, very calm, and I thought it kind of represented him. So I've never played this before, so forgive me, that's my excuse. So this is...
Well, if you struggle, I can switch.
Yeah, if you could chip in, maybe sing along over the top, that'd be great.
Awesome. So a piece like that, you know, you've done that for Dave, and how long would that take you to compose? Do you just get in your head in the headspace and then you?
I wrote that in a hotel room, actually in San Francisco. It probably took about an hour because the piece kind of came into my head. So I thought I just got to write it down. About an hour. But did you know? I think it's the same. But I'm used to hallucinating music. So
you know how you visualise the notes?
Yeah, I suppose I'm what you could call an audiot. Not an idiot, an audiot. Well, you can. Whereas, in as much as I can hear pieces of music fully formed in my head that come out, which is always a worry because you think, well, who wrote this? It's probably not mine. And I've been in a recording session conducting an orchestra quite recently for a film, conducting way, thinking, actually, even though I wrote this at 4 in the morning, this one feels okay. This piece of music feels all right. It's okay.
Yeah.
One of my mates who was leading the cello section looked at me and I could see the eyebrow going up. I was like, what? He went, no, nothing. No, what? And I suddenly realised, oh my God, I've actually written note for note, fully orchestrated, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
It's fairly well known, right?
Yeah, at which point, ladies and gentlemen, can we move on? And I had to sit up all night that night because I was delivering the score the next morning. I had to sit up all night and multi-track it on a cello, just a new piece of music from scratch, but which luckily did pop into my... Adrenaline's a great thing. Things will just kind of then come. But I think most of us can actually hear music. It's just when you practice, you get better at filtering out the noise. Mm. And it's knowing what to take out and leave out, which makes it then become easier to write. And I do honestly wake up sometimes in the morning and it's like, oh, there's a nice chord sequence or there's a whole tune worked out. Sometimes it just kind of comes out. Other times, I mean, like a lot of writers, I'm just in the habit. I've got a routine in the morning, which is I get up, I drink 3 pints of water, and I put the kettle on, I make a cup of tea, do some form of exercise, you know, about 1 push-up or something. That's probably normally all I can manage. And then from 6:10, I will write music until 7:30. And it might be up to a quarter of an hour of music. It won't look like it. It'll just look like mad scratchings. But that's normally a really good time just to kind of...
Is it comfort of the dark, and are you just like that secluded?
Yeah, I do that kind of thing. I've created an environment where I can have ideas. I think my wife would call it my panic room, or my man den, I suppose. But it is a place where I feel very comfortable. So if the ideas aren't coming, it's my fault. I can't say, well, you know, there's builders outside, or that I'm getting too many emails, or the phone. I don't have a home phone. It's great. We moved house, and everyone says, what's your phone number? I haven't got one. It's great.
Smart.
Yeah, I've got a mobile, but you just leave it off.
Yeah.
And there's loads of... It's quite easy to go off the grid, actually.
But you've got 4 kids. I mean, how do you manage? You know, like, I can't do a phone call at home without someone screaming and knocking down the door. Or...
Well, the kids are good. When we kind of built our new house... with a very much thing of when we come through this door, Mummy and Daddy act a bit differently through that door. So
it's called the bedroom.
No,
sorry.
Oh,
from the north of England. I said that already. What?
Took it there, didn't you?
Sorry,
I didn't know you used the bedroom.
Very funny.
And and they know that through there, that's kind of not that that's work, but that's where that's my kind of playroom. And because my wife's also a musician, she works from home too. And actually, when they do come in, it's normally for a good reason. My son, who's 8 years old, will say he'll come in from school, say, "Dad, why don't you play me what you've been working on today?" I go, "Okay." And I did this the other day. I played him something. I was really pleased with it. It was absolutely banging. It was kind of, this is happening. Full orchestra, beats, the lot. And it finished. And he was like a client. He kind of sat there on the sofa. I said, what? He said, I don't know how to say this, Dad. What? It's just not funky enough. So I sent him to bed. But he was right.
He's still there.
He was right. Yeah, he's still there. So grounded. No, but I mean, it's good. And they do get involved, and it's normally. It's a terrible one. My daughter, my oldest daughter, was playing around with GarageBand, which I can't really get my head around. And she'd written this tune. I thought, God, that's quite catchy. Actually, that's really quite good. And I borrowed it, shall we say?
Does she know you borrowed it?
Well, it found its way into maybe an orchestral recording, which then got picked up by some TV channels and gets used regularly on a British soap opera. And it kind of couple of years later, she said, Dad, that piece I wrote, she said, did you use it somewhere? I said, yeah. And you get royalties, don't you? Yeah. And she said, can I have a mobile phone? And I said, no. And she said, show me your statement. She got a mobile phone. And her phone bills are entirely paid by that piece of music.
That's awesome.
But it was a much better tune than I could have written. Honestly.
Really?
Yeah, and it still pays her phone bill, which is colossal.
I think that's an interesting thing of having kids, right? You know, when you are creating, there's so little, it's so unpolluted.
Yeah, there's no
thinking.
They've not filtered. They've not kind of thought, oh, maybe that's a bad idea. It's an idea, and those are the good. We all know it. It's true. This is the problem I have with classical music education. My teacher, hand on heart, God rest her soul, said you mustn't write music because it's very bad for your intonation. Which I still don't quite understand. I think actually what she was talking about was that up until very recently, there's always a difference between people who write and people who play, which is really weird, because up until 1915, 1918 in England, if you wrote music, you played, and if you played, you wrote. It's like being a racing driver and saying, do you know what, I'm not very interested in the engine.
Yeah.
That's insane. And for me, I'm really curious about how music works. And so the more I played, the more I kind of think, actually, I wonder if maybe I could do... And everyone said, well, no, you haven't studied composition. You know, really shouldn't. And a friend of mine who's a fantastic composer, he can't read music. In fact, my top 5 musicians, 3 of them can't read music. As a friend of mine said to me recently, he said, you may have swallowed a dictionary, but can you tell me a fucking joke that will make me laugh? Which is actually a really interesting point. It's a funny analogy that actually, with music, you can train so hard that actually you forget the fact that it is improvised at some point. We talk about playing music. We don't play with music. A lot of us don't play.
It can seem very serious.
Yeah, it is, very worthy. But the composers who we all revere were not serious people. They were writing ephemeral music that they wouldn't have gone to a classical concert. Maybe they might have gone to a concert of Haydn's music because he held a place briefly as someone who was revered for more than his lifetime. But that was insanely unusual. Even Bach was not held in the reverence that he is now. Mozart would have screamed with laughter at the idea that people would have been playing his music probably even 10 years after he died. He was writing current music based around tunes he was hearing in the street. Yeah, that's contemporary music.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have a bit of a problem with it because I think we can sometimes forget that the ink is wet on the page when it's written. And what I love doing is personally, spontaneously composing, because that's what composers do. And the moment you write it down is the moment you've edited out the stuff that could probably be left on the page, left on the cutting room floor. So I don't know if I'm any good as a composer, and it doesn't particularly worry me, but it's a thing that really makes me have a fun time playing.
Yeah.
And then it means playing's not a job. That I do that for fun, and when I'm playing, I think, well, I'm writing music for fun as well. So nothing feels too serious.
It feels sad, like, you know, from an early age, a child, you know, they start banging a drum or clacking spoons together. Music is often seen as a distraction or annoying, and you're often put off from playing with instruments.
It's true. It's true.
You know, unless you're trained. You know, like the number of times friends said, oh, little Sarah's learning to play the violin, and, you know, it sounds like the cat dying. And can't wait for her to get bored of it.
Well, the violin's the devil's own instrument for a beginner. Because, I mean, it does sound like hell.
Yeah.
It really does until you get pretty good on it. Unlike, I mean, a cello sounds nice actually from week 2. It's actually a much more kind of avuncular sound, and you can sit down to play it, and you're not half twisting and torturing your body. I mean, the violin is actually my favourite instrument, but I wouldn't dare play it.
It seems to be the one that everyone got. It was that or the trumpet.
Yeah, you know, it's true. Both of which are actually noise pollutants, and well, they are. I don't know. No, I mean, sorry, at an early age they are. But there is this odd barrier that we have, where even if you're learning the violin, the first thing you will be encouraged to do is go and get a book of exercises to work your way through. Now, when my children were learning to talk, they went through these phases. They went through this thing of first of all making, you know, kind of basic noises and then babbling And then the next stage, I think, is prosody, where kind of, you know, I had a chat with one of my nephews the other day, and he was sitting he sometimes assists in my studio. He's just 6 months now. And it's basically his mum, can you look after him for a bit? Because you're just at home, you're not really working, are you? Okay. So he comes in his chair, and he's sitting there, and I'll be playing music, and he really likes beats. And he's like, oh, this. And I had a chat with him, and he was like, how are you doing? I went,
Drinking again.
Yeah. And he will have phrase shapes that he knows that if I say, he'll go, it's like an old man in a club, you know, drinking port by the fire. Much like you will. And
I actually do sound like that.
Yeah.
Night out on the top.
But it was hilarious. And I was killing myself laughing, but all the phrase shapes were there. They were learnt. And all he needed to then do was fill them in with cat, which will find its way in. And then it will find its way. But if we take that process, learning language is exactly the same as acquiring musical skills. They are absolutely, we all know this, they're parallel processes, they're fundamentally interlinked. We phrase for our meaning, and we get it from music, and music gets it from speech. But if my kid is learning the violin, I'm going to give him a book of exercises. You know, if you're going to play these, that's like saying to my 6-month nephew, look, if you're going to talk to me, could you please use this English phrase book?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, and it's kind of, not criminal, but it's wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas you go to India, and music there is just part of the fabric. It's not...
Most of the world.
Most of the world, actually. It's just we happen to have put it in a lovely glass box and put it behind and said, this is very serious, and please don't talk.
Is that because it became more of a commercial asset in the West, more than a part of culture?
Yeah, I think, well, it became commercial in London, fully, like privately commercial in about 1740.
Why?
When people because actually the middle class started emerging. And where it had been kind of the preserve of the rich who could kind of own an orchestra and own a composer, and you would, if you were wealthy, you would own some, like Haydn was actually technically a servant. He was the Kapellmeister to Prince Esterhazy. He was employed within the court to basically be, do you know what, can you knock me out an overture? I've got some guests coming around for supper, so light some music for while we're eating, and my brother's just died, so we need to compose a requiem for next Sunday. It was, I mean, I'm being a bit flippant, but it was pretty much like that. And he's moaning all the time in his letters about the fact he's treated like below stairs in Downton. But it's absolutely the case. And that, there's this kind of weird sort of social function where we forget that actually music is often sort of just commonplace, and it should be. So what happened in London is you had the first music society in London was founded by a guy who made all his money by carrying coal around. He was a coal merchant, and he founded a music society on Soho Square, right bang in the middle of London's West End, where he'd charge people a penny for a cup of coffee and a string quartet.
Nice.
It's great. Drink and some music. Lovely. And that became a business. And Bach's son, J.C. Bach, came over and started kind of pairing up with this whole environment. And you then had this whole kind of middle class commissioning music. And it became this thing where we're going to put it in a salon. And actually, we're not going to have coffee. We're going to have tea. Or we're going to have some fine wines. And actually, this guy's got some pineapple. You know, it became kind of... the social climbing was attached to the more Italian the musicians were you were importing to play in your music society, the better it was. You instantly got this snob value of kind of, oh, they are from France. They must be so much better. So that's how Mozart came in. He toured England when he was 8 or 9 as this kind of wunderkind. You know, he's going to play blindfold, and you're going to pay loads of money. He'll do tricks. He'll play the piano backwards like this. He was a performing monkey. And on his day off, you know, his dad, Leopold, said, right, we're going to the races in Norwich, and they spaffed all the money away that he'd earned. I mean, you know, and yet our idea of this composer is that he was this sort of reserved genius sitting in amongst, you know, God was pouring music into his head. It's not like that at all. It really isn't. Sorry, it was a long answer to your question.
No, that was fascinating. I mean, just going into that, just from children, I believe you're doing something, you're creating, working with technology to try and allow that play to be part of it. Will you share a little bit of that story and what you're doing? Yeah, we've kind of not told anyone about this yet, but when I have to write music on very tight deadlines sometimes, you know, a film director will ring me up and say, we need a piece of music tomorrow. I mean, you know, this will be 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'll say, you know, well, what, do you want a rough sketch? No, we need it fully written and recorded by then. And this happens all the time. You can't say, well, do you know what? I haven't kind of got an idea. I'm not really feeling inspired.
you can force yourself to be inspired. Now, what Mozart did to get around this, he supposedly invented a musical dice game, with millions of permutations of tunes. So I was in Washington and in a hotel room, and a friend of mine, Sandy, rang up. He said, "Oh, yeah, we need a..." I went to an American accent. I can't. He said, "We need a couple of new cues for tomorrow." And I got some acetate with me, like overhead projector. Remember those? And some Sharpie pens, some of that stuff. I thought, well, what would Mozart do? He'd probably flip a theme upside down and round and round. Got an idea. So I wrote myself out a deck of cards, which look a lot like this, which basically I can't really see them, but I put a musical note on one and then realised, well, you can play it like that, or like that, or like that, or like that. So you've got 4 flips on the card. And I made up 30 of these things. And quickly, instantly a piece kind of wrote itself. I was like, oh, that's an interesting tune. Maybe swap that one around, flip that. Great, that's a tune. And then I could hear the harmony, how it would fit underneath. And then wrote it out. I had the cello with me, so I started recording it, put it in, sent it to Sandy, the director. And he rang me the next morning. He said, "Oh, I don't know what's happened to your music, but you're writing much better stuff than you were last week." So I thought maybe there's, but actually maybe there's something in this. Now, I've always been frustrated that, and similar to the thing with the dictionary and the music study books, that I was allowed to play with Lego when I was a kid. Sorry, you call them Legos, don't you? You're wrong. Lego. And it's maths, not maths. So if you want to take the S from maths and put it on Legos, that would be great. Lego, maths. But I didn't need to study architecture to play with Legos. They were just there as blocks. Yeah. And yet, if my kids want to play with music, they can either go and bash the piano, which is annoying, pick up a violin, which, as you know, is extremely annoying, or there's not really a great way for them to actually just get their hands dirty with it. There's no kind of Minecraft for music unless I'm missing something. There's not a tangible thing. So I went to a really lovely company called Think Fun, who they've got a great game for coding actually called Robot Turtles. I don't know if you've seen it. It tricks kids into learning code. It's brilliant. And they were very receptive to the idea. And we've got a game coming out. It's more of a pursuit, really, but basically a deck of these cards coming out whereby kids can kind of generate millions and millions of tunes with them. But I kind of thought, well, this is where technology can help a bit. I have a problem with kids playing kind of on a screen. I just, there does come this point when, the dead eyes set in, the wheels turning, but the hamster's dead, that kind of look, And so I thought, we've got to kind of get over that. And I think between us, we realised we can do something hopefully quite clever here. So it's a really simple system. All you do is you just basically enter, there's a little code on the corner of each card. Each card's got 4 different positions, obviously, it can go into. And in a musical phrase, there's kind of 4 different positions in a phrase, if you think about it. If this one says, dee-da-da-dum-dum. If that's an opening phrase, forgive my singing, it's horrible. It would be dee-da-da-dum-dum. The second measure might be dee-da-da-dum-dum. The third measure might be dee-da-da-yum-dum. The fourth measure would be dee-da-da-dum-chum. There's 4 completely different phrasings within one phrase of one measure. So how cool would it be if we can arrange these on a screen and the kid can kind of move them around and then think, oh, actually, I want to flip that one over. What's that going to sound like? Dee-da-da-dum-dum, da-dee-da-da-dum, dee-da-da-dum-dum, dee-da-da-dum, yada-da-dum. And you've not got a computer playing it back. You've got a percussion player playing it back. So a friend of mine's Evelyn Glennie, who's a really good percussion player. And she came in and she recorded every single card and every single permutation. Nuts. So each measure's been recorded separately. But then we thought we'd do it properly. Went into Abbey Road and recorded them. So you're sitting there as a kid. You can now move Evelyn Glennie around and you can mould your tune any number of how many millions of ways. And we thought, OK, that's OK. But it's more interesting, for me, kids get ownership of a piece of music when they name it and when they've actually had to fight with it a bit. So part of it was that they then name the piece, name goes on it as a composer, and then prints out the sheet music with a blank star for them to go and play with it with their friends. It's really important it comes back out of the machine and that it comes into the real world. Now, they might, if they're lucky, have a keyboard in the house. They might have a flute in the house. They might have a teacher at school who can show them how it works on the piano. That was a really important stage for me. But then I thought, maybe we're missing a trick here. So I then wrote accompaniments for every single card, in every single position, in every single bar position as well.
Wow.
It's quite a lot. And I've then recently been hacking them. We, again, recorded them all in Abbey Road with the full-size symphony orchestra. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I didn't tell the company that. Because I thought what could happen is you might have, well, that bar there and that card there might just scrunch together and the harmony would just clash horribly. Yeah. But actually, the more cinematic you make the chords, the more your ear kind of goes, yeah, that fits with that. And it works. It's really weird. So awesome. As a kid, you can go online, you can move Evelyn Glennie around, then you kind of go, I'm going to hear Evelyn Glennie accompanied by a full-size symphony orchestra playing my tune, and up to however many measures, 32 measures, we'll play your piece. And whilst it's playing, you can flip the cards over, move them around, pull another one in, throw that one away, and it will recompose itself as you go. And we're going to call it Compose Yourself. Because that's...
It's nice.
It's quite a British thing. Yeah. And the company was saying, we can't call it that. We can't. It's too negative. I said, well, no, compose yourself just means kind of focus. What's wrong with saying to a kid, focus? Oh, that's okay. I say it to my kids, compose yourself and compose yourself. And you compose yourself. What's wrong with that? So we're going to bring it out hopefully later this year. It's very secret, so don't tell anyone yet. And I want it to be, if it works, I want to then reinvest the money and get guests in to write cards. We'll do a deck of cards. And it'll be a deck, basically, and the website's all completely free. And I want the website to be a complete portal to have free piano lessons on it, free vocal lessons on it, to have here's how to build your own instrument. It's a way of getting kids in there and it be sticky for them to kind of go, actually, I can build my own violin. I can do my own thing. Here's how. It's then be a way of...
Gives them the confidence.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Because honestly, anyone can... You are all born musical. This is the other frustration. Everyone is born a musician. And we, through neural pruning, we naturally lose what we're not using. We all know this. I mean, when I've been teaching at the Royal Academy of Music, I've maybe had 12 different students, extraordinarily talented cellists from Korea, kind of come through my class. Every single one of them has got absolute pitch, has got perfect pitch. Every single one of them. Now, it's quite a rare... I mean, I've got it, but it's kind of a bit of an affliction. And I know it's because I slept in the room next to where my mum taught the violin, so my A reference is on a... exactly like that, kind of really... But it's constantly there like a tinnitus. It's my reference tone. Yeah. Used to freak my physics teacher out because I never told him, he'd get an oscilloscopes. And I said, no, we do frequencies. I said, go on, sir, give me a frequency, give me a frequency. He'd go, woo! It's 492, I believe so. Sheppard, how do you do that? Can't tell you, sir. It's secret. And I never told him. He had no idea. It was hilarious. But it's, what's weird is every single one of these students had perfect pitch. And I was looking into it. And of course, I might be completely wrong here, but in Korean, there's many subtle differences in the vowel sounds, even for, say, a sound like ah, which can have fundamentally change the meaning of a word. So knowing the pitch difference is critically important. So therefore, that circuitry you're kind of born with neurologically is retained, and you keep it. So therefore, guess what? You keep your pitch.
Well, like I don't hear, there's a few well-known Korean sort of artists, but you'd think the world would be flooded with them if they have that.
Well, yeah,
but certain countries.
It doesn't necessarily make you more musical. It just it will mean that you. It's weird. People have this thing. I've got to get perfect pitch. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily. It means actually I have a sort of snow blindness to certain. If something's in quarter tones, it will take me a while to kind of recalibrate and process it. For one of my main music exams at school, the mock exam, the fake one, shows how old I am, was off a tape-to-tape machine. And it was running at a different speed from what I'd been recording it at. And I sat there and wrote nothing. And in a test I normally get 100% in, I couldn't actually write the notes down because I had no place to start. No idea. And the teacher wouldn't believe me. I was like, I literally can't hear it. Wow. Play it to me on the piano, fine. I can write all 5 parts out. It's not a problem. It's there.
Just stuck you.
So it's not a great thing. It doesn't make you more musical. It just means you... I can cheat in music quizzes. They're going to say... they'll play you a piece of music and go, well, I know it's in G minor, therefore it's the 40th symphony. You can instantly kind of go, I know it's that because of that, which is cheating, really. But it's only good for pub quizzes, really.
Which you're good at.
Which I'm very good at, yeah.
I'd like to hear some more music. Anybody else?
Okay.
No, I'll let Philip play. So you do pride yourself. I mean, we were just talking about the kids and things like that, and the new game, which good luck with that.
Yeah.
Improvisation seems to be one of your other things. Go on then.
Oh, God. Okay, well, I can't... let's call it spontaneous composition, because improvisation, I think, is a dirty word. I think, because I've played in jazz clubs before now, and people come and say, oh, I'm not sure that chord that you were playing was right for that sequence there.
Right.
So I think it'd be quite good to build a piece from what's in the room. I could use your voice.
Whose?
Yours. That'd be quite funny.
All right, let's ask some more questions.
Let's not do that. No. So we'll do it this way. If I had to write a piece quickly using your help, we could do it very simply. We could take things like the time of day, someone's phone number. We can even just take straight. So if someone could shout a note out, a note name out. F. Great. F. Another one? C flat. F, C. What was that? A flat. F, C, A flat. Okay. So we've got F, C, A flat. F. Ooh, that's nice. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Sorry, what's your name? Sorry? Shirley. Are you sure? You said it as a question. Shirley? There's a joke there. So this is a waltz for Shirley. Shirley, this is for you. If this is bad, it's Shirley's fault, okay? Yeah.
Shirley, that's £10,000, please.
I need you to sign a release form as well.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Surely not. Okay. Sadly, I have to put my questions down because you've all written too many.
Good.
We're going to switch over. So, Bob from Sunderland says, what is your favourite piece of classical music, symphony, and who's your favourite composer and why?
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Okay. Favourite symphony? Yeah, Mahler's Second Symphony, The Resurrection. Unbelievable piece of music. Do you know it?
No.
Okay. Such a peasant.
Was it played in the north of England?
No.
No. Right.
No. It's the most incredibly earth-shattering, brilliant, radical, he wasn't making any friends with his music, Mahler. He was someone who really did write for himself and did not have an easy ride. And it's just fabulous. So that was the first one. And was it favourite classical composer and why? I believe was the rest of it. Actually, favourite. I'm not sure if it's technically classical, but for me, Monteverdi. Unbelievable. Tell me about Monteverdi, Will.
It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah. Mr. Green Mountain.
I used to have it with ice.
Yeah, nice. He was the most, again, really utterly radical composer who around the turn of the beginning of the 17th century in Venice, was wrapped up in amongst the whole kind of Galilean, actually, the Galileo's crowd, and was actually inventing this new form of opera. And funnily enough, science and art and music were all, it was the same clutch of people. In those days, the whole thing was totally interlinked. There was no, oh, you're a scientist, you're an alchemist, you're a composer, you're all in different boxes. These were all people working together. So when Monteverdi was writing his big classical pieces for St. Mark's, Venice, his initial reaction was, this is an interesting building. How can I make this a surround sound piece? And he would actually place choirs and singers all around the building. Wow. He was using technology, the architecture, to give us that kind of surround sound we can barely get in a good cinema these days. You know, these are not new ideas. So for me, Monteverdi, he's absolutely the man. The man. Yes.
So when you've got your headphones on,
yes,
when you travel,
yes,
what do you actually listen to?
A mixture of really early, like Renaissance music. Classical music I tend to listen to is probably Mozart if I have to kind of go in on that period, and I really like electronic dance music.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. There's two types of music.
Dance, though.
Yeah, funny. There's two types of music. There's good music and there's everything else, and it's true, you know. And
I have a question about that. So.
Well, there's a lot of really, really bad classical music, and there's a lot of really, really bad pop music. But you know what? There's some amazing music being made now that's in the charts. That's the great thing. Because the technology... Well, no, not even that. Yeah, you're feeding me a line there. No.
Yeah. You did the last album, so it kind of helps.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of work in that world, but I'm delighted that my kids will be listening to musicians who can sing, who can play, who are kind of technologically really up. But in the 80s, when I was a bit younger, younger than you, there were musicians around then who couldn't sing, who couldn't play, because the programming became the thing, and you know, some of them are featured in the exhibition here. And actually, the moment the record industry kind of went into complete decline, the money went back into live, which means you can't be a fake. You can't be processed in a studio, because you've got to be able to do it on stage. So the majority of the people actually in the Billboard Top 100 now are amazing musicians. Genuinely.
Yeah, they're actually good at what they do.
Someone like an Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift or people like, you know, these are not bad musicians. These are people who are actually at the top of their game compared to the equivalent, you know, 20, 30 years ago. So actually, you know, there's so much good music now.
Yeah.
And I am a snob about it, but I know what I like, and it's kind of everything that's got energy and is good and is not lame and doesn't have passion.
What happened to the electric cello? Because you're a part of that sort of evolution.
Yeah.
Talking of great music in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, the electric string instruments are kind of, they're perceived as being a thing in the 80s. They've been around for a really long time. I mean, theremin, he pioneered a theremin cello.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So, you know, there's a lot of experimentation, particularly in Russia, with early electronic instruments. For me, I have an electric cello which is made for me in Seattle, and it's really great for horror films, for putting... It's true. It does really, you know, terrifying noises, and it's also really great to use as a top line in kind of club music, because it does this weird kind of haunting, floaty stuff. I don't tend to tour with it much, because actually an acoustic cello can do just as much, if not more. And what you can do is you can work out a sound on electric cello and then kind of reverse engineer it and then put it back onto a normal cello. And I'm a great believer actually in, you know, we kind of briefly mentioned peak technologies. I'm a great believer in using a peak technology that might be really old and then finding maybe a new method or a new technique, and then applying it back to that and seeing what the result is. We're often looking forward. Yeah. I mean, I could show you, I'm sure a lot of you know the great thinker Kirchner, you know. he's the most incredible visionary thinker who, if you look through his notebooks, and these are 17th century things, he was inventing 17-string guitars that made in the shape of a flower that Jerry Garcia would have played, frankly. He was inventing the equivalent of a musical laptop, which was a box with interchanging phrases, a bit like I'm trying to do. He was inventing sonic systems for houses. Yeah, so for me, electric instruments are a really interesting thing for the studio. I kind of get a bit uncomfortable with someone sitting on stage playing it. I don't know why.
It was like a prop back when it launched more.
Yeah, and a lot of my students kind of went into that field, but there's always something a bit kind of awkward about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you mentioned before, and I forgot to ask, you know, this is new.
Yeah.
And yours are very old, but it's the exact same
same
instrument.
model.
So what's the difference in the sound?
Well, the difference in the sound, I mean, this is...
Or why do you play a $2 million piece?
Well, of kit.
Besides you can't.
Because it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think the Stradivarius is my favourite type of instrument because it comes preloaded with a sound. It comes loaded with a sound that's kind of... I can show you. A Stradivarius make a sound that's fruity and kind of sounds like this. So kind of... But if you're trying to play the bass line of a kind of heavy rock song, that won't work. So my Georgian cello that I use at home, which is the 18th century one, if I'm playing the equivalent line on there, will sound more kind of like this. Kind of a little bit more sinew to it. Now, the weird thing about playing a really fine instrument that has this preloaded sound is you can then learn that sound and then apply it into another instrument.
So you can use a modern instrument, make it sound like...
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing that I think...
But you can't do that unless you know how to play the older.
I think unless you've kind of had the experience of being kind of slightly moulded or forced by it to come... It's like riding someone else's horse. You kind of have to come to it. And then there's a compromise point, and then if it's a really well-trained horse, it's going to kind of teach you something about how to then ride something else. Does that make sense? And it's the same with instruments. When you play a really old... I get this sometimes with my cello. I'll be playing a piece of music on it, say something by Beethoven, and somehow the cello will just kind of resonate like straight out. It's got it. And you think, well, actually, this has been played on this instrument before. So, and I'm not a great kind of... I don't really hippie-ish about it, but it's almost like the instrument's kind of gone, yep, know this one. But it's true. If you think about it,
a lot, or not?
well, wood is this kind of green material that can, it's been flexible all the way through its life up until when it gets set and then begins to dry. Now, Stradivarius, coming from Cremona, the wood that Stradivarius was using, say the instrument I use was made in 1692, that wood would have come from a building, from the roof of a building, probably a barn, actually, that probably would have been a couple of hundred years old. The wood itself would in turn be 200, 300 years old. So by the time it's come to you now, it's probably 1,000, 1,100 years old, the material. By which point the wood's kind of settled into...
Character.
It's kind of got gout. It's kind of got a kind of... it does what it does. And the voice that it has won't change.
Right.
But then it's like learning a character voice. You can then kind of take that voice and then you can pull it back onto another instrument because you've kind of learned how to adapt to it. And it's the same with any sound. You can kind of... I'm lucky to work with some amazing electric guitar players. And I remember thinking, I'd love to get a distortion pedal. Actually, you don't need one. Because if you read Pythagoras on how strings work, all you need to do, and this is my misspent youth, very sad, I learned how to isolate harmonics on a string. I'm going to make an excuse here that this not being my cello, it might not work. But, so, the way, you'll all know this, I'm sure, but the way a string works is you're not hearing one note, you're hearing all these notes at the same time. You're hearing... all of those are present in that sound, which is cool if you're at school and someone says, can you play Doctor Who? It's in the string anyway.
Yeah.
Or if you want to do a Jimi Hendrix, it can be... It's kind of there. It's in the strings already. I'm not playing that, I'm British. And independence. Is it working? Discuss.
All right, good night. Yes.
And because when I was younger, I found actually the cello is actually a really efficient synthesizer. And I kind of read what Pythagoras was saying about dividing strings and stuff, and he was kind of almost writing the manual for, look, it can do all this stuff. And I found it can actually do loads and loads of different things. And I sometimes actually end up doing sound effects on films. I've had a motorbike in a couple of films, because you can do that on a cello kind of. This is Will the Smart. I had the fortune of following Will whilst he tore up around South Cellist on a motorbike, and I was trying to follow him in a very large car. And this is Will basically going to. That's kind of.
It's a nice bike, though. So.
That's kind of it. But the cello can do. It can if you kind of deconstruct the sound. It's a case then of working out, well, which harmonics does that use? Where's that tone colour from? Even to the extent you can kind of imitate people's voices with it. But it's in a way it's the simplest physical system for creating sound. It's just that's it. That is it. So actually adding other things to it. I tend to add loads of kind of effects pedals and then gradually strip them out. The more I can then hopefully do with my fingers. And I think there is a point. I'm going to move over here so I don't play anymore. There is a point at which we get very obsessed with technology about making interfaces simpler. And I have a problem. I have a problem with instruments on devices, like kind of musical instruments, say on an iPad, you know, piano, or here's a new thing. Because there's no feedback, there's no kind of push response. And actually, we're all trying to make things easier. Well, because a cello or a piano or a violin has peaked as a technology, we're not trying to make the system any easier. It's digital in the sense that we're using our fingers. To me, that's what digital technology is. Well, what? It's true. It's true. You know, there might be a joke, but it's true. Yeah. And actually, my job is to get my skills better in the way I input what I'm doing, and hopefully get my fingers more sophisticated, because the end result will then be richer. Now, if we make the cello much easier, it's all going to be vanilla all the way down. What's the point?
Yeah.
How about making the interfaces more complicated?
You often find that with kids, you know, you give them something too easy to do, and
I can't do loom bands, surprisingly, but my kids love them, because do you know what? They're difficult, and grown-ups can't do them. Yeah. If I'd said, oh, do you know what? We can get a device that just does that for you. Not remotely interested.
Yeah. It's like being in a relationship where it's too easy.
Yeah. I wouldn't know.
Anyway, we have a load of questions still to do.
Yeah.
So you taught, this is a good one, actually.
The others were good.
Oh, I wrote that one. No, this is a good one. You talked about pencils, but not about erasers. Ooh. Is that significant?
Is that a question? Is that significant? No, yes, no. Yeah, no. I scratch stuff out. I don't rub things out. I tend to draw it out, because actually, it's quite good seeing what you've crossed out, actually, isn't it? It's like the same in corrections in an essay. My kids aren't allowed to erase stuff that they write. They have to put a neat line through it and write the alternate word above, which I think is really important to kind of learn your working. And funnily enough, classical composers did this a lot, but then they didn't have magic erasers for their ink, and they'd sometimes cross-hatch all the way across the page. Like, damn it, no, this is wrong. But actually, in doing that, what they then wrote was then way better. But you could see there'd been conflict over that point. And I like going back over my notes and saying, actually, I had a real problem writing that. You know, yeah. So yeah, I don't tend to use rubbers. There'd be muck all over the floor. I tend to just scrub things out.
Scratch it out.
Yeah.
Another good one.
Go on then. Go on.
Who in 12? No. During waking hours, is there ever a time when you don't hear music in your head? If not ambient.
Ooh.
Makes you sound mad, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I can switch it off. God, yeah. I mean, but I have to put myself into a mood in a place where I can kind of hear it for sure. Oh, okay, excellent.
Okay.
Yes, so I can.
Because that's a good side. How do you replenish? How do you stop going into sort of a block or hit fear, or how do you detox from this pressure?
Easily. My studio is It's basically a library. We bought the site of there's a famous writer in England called Enid Blyton, who wrote children's books, and we bought the site of her house, and my studio is actually where her writing room was. So I thought, I don't want to turn it into kind of loads of wires, so the first thing I did with the architect is find a way of just hiding all the tech. I collect books as well, so those create the sound insulation. And then everything on one bookshelf is something that cheers me up, makes me happy, or will provoke me. It might be that it's kind of a really good packet of tea. It could be that it's a game a friend's given me. It could be that it's a photo. All I need to do is turn around and look at that and kind of go, oh, I know. But if I'm really stuck for a piece, I've got a board on the right-hand side of my studio, which is kind of just, they're friends of mine or they're people I've met who really inspire me. And it might be, what would they do? Or if I had to write a piece about what they do, which I could never do, what would it sound like? And instantly you're off and running and you've got a tune. I mean, it's not hard. It's just knowing how to be inspired, actually, and never being scared. 90% of what I write is absolute rubbish, but I'm really good at editing. I can throw it away. I'm very happy to throw it away. The recycling bin is full every week. Honestly.
Do you think you're at the top of your...
No, I don't want to be at the top. No, I genuinely don't. There's no, absolutely not. The moment I think I know how to do it, that'd be awful.
Yeah.
That'd be hideous. That's not a goal.
Certain challenges will force you into thinking differently.
Yeah.
Just talking of challenges, I mean, just because we're actually nearly out of time, will you talk quickly about the Olympics? Because the challenge you had there seemed horrific.
It was. Yeah, I was in October of 2010. I was asked to rearrange all the national anthems of the world for the Olympics that we were doing in 2012. And I went and bought a map, and there's a lot of countries. There's 206 of them. And they said, it's OK, you've got until the January. I thought, OK, that's kind of, whatever it is, 14 months. And I signed the contract, and they said, no, this January. And I was on tour at the time with a ballet, what I'd written, and I had a film at Sundance and things. And basically had to kind of go into lockdown mode of writing 4 arrangements a day.
Wow.
But you know what? It's great. It's pressure. But then each one had to be sent at the head of state of each country for approval for the next 25 years. So the pressure was insane. So I treated it as, do you know the game Risk? I treated it as a real-world risk. I had my map on the wall with a Sharpie pen, and any time a country was done, it was crossed out. It looked like Dr. Strangelove by the end. The first country to write back and approve was North Korea. But it was the former leader who then died, and he had approved my anthem, which means they can never use any other version because he was a god. I win.
It's easy.
Yeah, cinch. Yeah.
All right, so just jumping off that, we have to sadly wrap. He's actually staying just down the road, so if you do want to visit. But I thought both John and Carol heard you play an amazing piece that I think is a beautiful way to end the night. And if you would, I think that would be a nice treat for everybody.
OK, cool. This is, for me, I had a bit of a sort of life change when I worked with Jeff Buckley. I didn't know who he was at the time. He came to this concert hall in London, and he was very late for his rehearsal. We're just about to actually do the concert. And he opened up his exercise book, his kids' exercise book, and started singing, and it blew my mind. This is probably the greatest musician I've ever heard in my life. And I still have goosebumps. I think about him every day. It was his last concert in Europe, and I was very lucky to have played with him. He made this song even more famous than it was already. This is a Leonard Cohen song called Hallelujah, and I hope you like it.
beautiful. Not bad, is it?
So good. Thank you. Thank you.